Dear God in heaven,
Mwari wedu kudenga,
we are overwhelmed with the responsibility of being the final generation at the end of the world.
tinonzwa tichikurirwa
We've
neresponsibility yekuva
woken
final
up
generation
to
magumo enyika.
realize that we have been sleeping, perhaps
Takapepuka
not as
tikaona kuti
others,
tanga
but it has
takarara,
been asleep.
pamwe kwete kurara
And
kwakaita
we
vamwe,
ask that you
asi
would
tanga
refresh
takarara.
us,
Tinokumbira
that you would
kuti
help us to study
mutirefreshe,
the messages that have been given to us to prepare us for this time,
mutibetserewo
that we may
kudzidza
have greater
mamessages
understanding
atakapiwa kuti tigadzirire
of
nguva
you
ino,
and what you
tikuvaone
require of us.
kukunzwisisai zviri
And
nani,
we ask
uye
this
kuti
in Jesus' name.
murikwaya chibva
Amen.
kwatiri. Izvi tinonamata muzita
Okay.
raJesu. Amen.
So we're going to start with a
Saka
reading of Daniel
tichatanga
chapter 11, verse 40 to 45.
nekuverenga Daniel
And I'm
11:40
going
to
to
45.
share that
Ndichashare
for
iyoyo
your reading.
kuitira kuti mugone
And I'd
kuverenga.
like you to follow along with me carefully.
Toda kuti mutevedzere neni.
Daniel
Zviri
11, 40 to 45.
Daniel 11:40 kusvika
And at the time
45.
of the end,
Panguva yekupedzisira
1798,
1798.
shall the king of the south,
Mambo
revolutionary
wekuzasi,
France,
revolutionary
push
France,
or war at the king of the north, the papacy,
vachasandudzira kana kuita
inflicting
hondo
a deadly wound
na
and then a death.
king of the north anova
And the
papasi.
king of the north,
Vovapa
the
ronda
papacy,
rinouraya.
shall
King of the
retaliate,
north
shall come
papasi
against the king of the south in
achauya
1989,
achiretaliata kuna
like
king
a
of the south
whirlwind,
na
destructive and
1989
rising up,
sechamupupuri
with chariots
chinokuvadza
and with horsemen, with the
achisumuka
military
nemacharios
aid of the
nemahorsemen
United States,
nemilitary aid
and with many
yeveunited
ships,
states
economic
nezvikepe
strength.
zvakawanda inova economic strength.
And he, the king of the north,
Zvakare iye
shall enter
king of
into
the
the
north
countries, the
achapinda
satellite states of the Soviet
mudzinyika
Union,
masatellite states
and shall
eSoviet Union
overflow and pass over, like a flood,
akupfashukira nekukunda
inundating
sezvinoita
the country
flood
around.
achinyudza nyika iyo yakatenderedza.
The king of the north, he,
King of the
shall enter
north
also
iye
into the glorious land,
achapinda
into the
zvakare
United States of
muglorious land
America.
inova United States of
And
America.
many people
Vazhinji
that have
vanhu
not previously been in the hand of
vanga
the king of
vasati
the north
vambova mumaoko
shall be overthrown
king
by
of
the
the north
flood.
vachakundwa
Because the
neflood
same way
nekuda
that
kuti
the
nenzira
United
imwe
States and the
chete
papacy entered
United States
into
nepapasi
the
vakapinda
Soviet Union in
muSoviet Union
1989
na1989
also is the same
zvakare
way that it
ndiyo nzira
enters
imwe
into
chete
the glorious land.
yainopinda muglorious land.
But these shall escape out of
Asi
the
ava
hand
vachapukunyuka
of
kubva
the king of the
muruoko
north,
rwaking of the
even
north
Edom and Moab, and the
kunyange
chief
Edom,
of the children of
Moab
Ammon.
nevakuru
He,
vevana
the
vaAmon.
king of the north, shall
Iye king
stretch
of the
forth its
north
hand also
achatambanudza ruoko
upon
rwake
the countries,
zvakare
the rest
pamusoro
of the world,
penyika
and
dzinova
the
nyika
land
dzese
of Egypt,
dzemunyika.
the countries,
Zvakare
shall not
nyika
escape.
yeIjipita
But the king of the north
macountries
shall
aya
have power
haazogoni
over the
kupukunyuka. Asi king
treasures
of
of
the north
gold and
achava
silver, over
nemasimba
economic might,
treasure negold
and over all the precious things of Egypt,
nyaya
resources.
dzeeconomy netreasure
And the
dzese
Libyans and
nemaresource
the
eEgypt.
Ethiopians shall be
VeLibya
at the king of the
neveEthiopia
north's steps.
vachange vari pamasteps aking of the
The
north
tidings out of the
vachifambirana
east
pamatsiko
and out
ake.
of the north,
Nhau
radical
dzinozobva
Islam,
kueast nekunorth
shall trouble
dzinova
him.
dzeradical Islam
Therefore the king of the north
dzichamushungurudza.
shall go forth
Naizvozvo
with great
king
fury
of
to
the north
destroy
achaenda
and
nekutsamwa
utterly to
kukuru
make away many.
aparadze nekuparadza vanhu
And the king of
vakawandisa.
the north
King of the north
shall plant the tabernacles,
achazodzika
the worship
matabernacle
place
ake
of his
dzinova nzvimbo
palace, of his
dzekunamatira
government,
dzepalasi yake
between the
dzehurumende
seas
yake
in
pakati
the glorious holy
penyanza
mountain in the United
mukati
States.
meglorious holy
Yet the king of the
mountain
north
inova
shall come to its
United
end,
States.
and none shall help
King
the
of
king
the
of the
north
north.
achazosvika pamagumo ake hapana achamubatsira.
So we will draw this out.
Izvi tichazvidrowa.
I hope to use my e-reader. It has a habit of
Ndinoda kushandisawo
which it
e-reader
has done
yangu
again. So I'll
ine
just
habit yekungombo
bring it back.
kata ndichangozama kuigadzirisa.
Okay. So let's draw this out.
Ngatizvitarei izvi.
Daniel 11, and
Daniel
we're going to
11.
concentrate on 40 and 41.
Tinyanya
But we
kuconcentrata
do
paverse
understand
40
that
na
the rest of the
41.
verses are repeating large in a chiastic structure, and we will
Asi
touch on
tinonzwisisa
that.
kuti mavhesi mamwe acho ese anodzokorotsa achiwedzera uye ane structure yechiasm. Tichazozvibata izvi.
1798,
1798
verse 40
ndima ya40
is the beginning.
ndiko mavamba.
And it is a war between the king of the south
Ihondo
and the
pakati
king of the
paking of the
north.
south naking of the north.
And that war is going to continue.
Hondo iyoyo
And we
ichaenderera
see verse
mberi.
40 again
Toona zvakare verse 40
in 1989.
na 1989.
Again, king of the
Zvakare
north against the king of the south.
king of the north achirwisana na king of the
And it
south.
is represented here as a flood.
Pano inoratidzwa seflood.
And that flood represents the conquest
Flood iyi inomiririra
of
kukunda
spheres of influence.
vachiwana maspheres of
It
influence.
involves many things, but that is what it is at its heart.
Hondo dzemaspheres of influence.
Then we're going to come to verse
inoinvolvawo
41.
zvakawanda asi pamwoyo payo maspheres of influence.
So we understand that verse
Tozosvikawo
40
paverse
is
41.
a point in time,
Tonzwisa kuti verse 40 ipoint
1798.
1798.
It is also a
Zvakare
period in time.
iperiod yenguva.
We are living in the time of the end.
Zvinonzi
We're going to come to verse 41.
Tichasvika paverse 41.
Verse 41
Verse 41
is also a point in time. It is
inguva
Sunday law.
zvakare isunday law.
And I'm going to mark it as July 18,
Apa panozota July 18
2024.
2024.
It is a point
Ipoint
and it is a period.
zvakare iperiod.
So we have reached verse 41 and we are in verse 41.
Tasvika paverse
Key
41
word,
zvakare
a
tiri
key
paverse
word is
41.
the word also,
Pane keyword vara rekuti also.
because the same way that the king of the north
Nekuti nzira imwe chete iyo king of the
warred
north
and won
akaita
against the king
hondo
of the south in 1989
akawina against king of the south
through
na
a flood is the
1989
same way that it will war in verse
achiita
41.
flood.
So, but this
Ndonzira
time
imwe
in
chete
verse
yaacharwa
41,
achiwina
we
nayo
see
verse 41.
that it is the
Asi
king of the
izvezvi
north
paverse
against who?
41 tinoona kuti ndi king of the north achirwisana nani?
Against the glorious land.
Achirwisana neglorious land.
And it is a flood
Iflood
and it is a conquest
zvakare iconquest
of spheres of influence.
kana kuti hondo yemaspheres of influence.
We continue on in verse 41, and the king of the
Toenderera
north
mberi paverse 41
will also enter the countries
king of the north achapindawo zvakare mudzinyika
or Egypt.
kana kuti muijipita.
And then we'll have the close of probation.
Pozoita kuvharwa kwemutsa.
So we have left verse 40. We are now in verse
Tasiya verse
41.
40 taapa verse 41.
Again, as I said, verse 44 and 45, chiastic structure. We can also say verse 41 is
chiastic structure.
verse 45, and we'll look at that
41
more
verse
closely later.
45. Tichazozvitarisawo.
We mark this Sunday law
Chizvongorora later. Masunday
using
law
the
iyi
symbol
tinoimaka
of
tichishandisa
Quintus,
symbol ya
Fabius,
Quintus,
Maximus,
Fabius,
Gerges,
Gerges
in the year 273
ra273
BC.
BC.
No, 272 BC, sorry.
272 BC.
So Quintus
Quintus
comes from the month Quintilis.
anobva pamwedzi waQuintilis.
You were called Quintilis if you were born in the 5th month,
Waidaidzwa
not
uchinzi
on the
Quintilis
5th day.
kana wakazvarwa
Once upon a time,
wechifai,
it was
kwete
fashionable to
pazuva
call your
rechifai.
daughters April or
zvaimbova
May
mufashion
or
kudaidza
June.
mwana wako
It's
nezita
just not
remwedzi kuti
fashionable
April,
today.
May
But
kana
it's the
June.
same concept.
Zvino hazvisisiri
You were
hazvo
born in the
mufashion
5th month,
asi
you got
pfungwa imwe
called,
chete iyoyo
could be called quintilis.
wakazvarwa
Or if you were
mumwedzi
the
wechi5
5th child, you
waigona
could get called
kudaidzwa
quintilis.
uchinzi quintilis. Kana kuti dei wanga uri mwana wechi5 waigona
That's
kudaidzwa
July.
uchinzi quintilis. Ndiyo July.
Fabius, Faber bean,
Fabius,
because the ancestors of this man were
beans.
bean farmers.
Nekuti
So
madzitateguru
Faber
emunhu
bean
uyu vairima beans. Saka Faber
connected
beans
with elections and
yakabatana
voting.
nemaelection nenyaya dzekuvhota.
Maximus is the greatest.
Maximus ndiye mukuru mukuru.
Gerges is a whirlpool.
Gerges zvinoreva whirlpool.
Because Maximus Gerges was
kuti
quite a
Maximum
glutton.
Gerges aiva
He
nemadyo.
consumed every luxury he came across when he was young.
chese cheluxury chaaisangana
Now, he was a
nacho
general.
paaiva
He was a pretty successful general.
aiva
He fought in
general
the Third
akanga
Samnite
akabudirira.
War. The Samnites were a tribe in
Akarwa muhondo
South
yemaSamnites
Central Italy.
vaiva tribe yaiva
And
kuSouth
he
Central
had
Italy.
a couple of very good defeats of those. So he was a
akavakundawo
general.
zvakanaka ivavo saka aiva
He was
general.
also a consul 3
aivawo
times.
consul
Now, a consul
consul
was the highest elected office of the Roman Republic.
ndiye ofisi
And you could only hold
yepamusoro-soro
it for
inenge
12 months.
yasarudzwa
And
kuroman
he held
office
the office of consul
aingoibata
3 times.
12 months. Asi
So
yakaibata
what he's
katatu
really
office
known
iyi.
for is
Zvaanonyatsokuzivikanirwa
being ambassador to Egypt,
kunge
leading
ari
a delegation of
ambassador
3
yeEgypt
to Egypt
achilida
in
delegation
272
yevatatu
BC,
kuenda kuEgypt. Akamirira Rome
after Egypt had
270
sent a delegation to them in 273.
272 BC.
So that's
Mushure
one
mekunge
thing that
Egypt
he is well
yasendawo
known
delegation
for.
kwavari muna 273.
The other thing that he
Ndochinhu
is known for
chaanozikanirwawo chinhu.
is
Chimwe
before he
chaanozikanirwawo
was
zvakare
consul, he was curule
ndechekuti
edile.
asati
Now,
ava
a curule
consul aiva
edile
curo
was a
edile.
magistrate who
Curo
could make
edile
laws
aiva
that
magistrate aigona
affected
kuita
the public
mitemo
markets and the economy.
yaiafecta mamarkets epublic
And while he
uye
was curule
economy.
edile,
Ari curo
he
edile kudaro
imposed fines on
akaimpoza
some of the
mafine
wealthy matrons
pane mamwe
of Rome,
matrons vari wealthy
accused them of
vekurome
adultery,
akavaacusa
and raised a huge amount of money,
nezveadultery
where
akareisa
he
mari
built
dzakawanda
the
wanda
first and largest
apo
temple to Venus.
akabuilda temple
And it is called
yekutanga
Venus
ikurukuru yakadaidzwa ichinzi Venus.
obsequiens,
Inodaidzwa ichinzi Venus obsequiens
or
kana kuti
obedient, compliant Venus.
Venus inoteerera iri compliant inoshandika nayo.
You did this really, building these large temples and any structure really was, back in those days, it was pretty good
Mumazuva iwayo
propaganda. It was like
kuvaka
advertising.
mazibuilding
So
ava
on this
mazitemple yaiva
temple,
propaganda
there'd be the
yakanyanya
sign
zvaita
saying
kunge
Venus
advertising.
obsequiens, and then underneath it, it
Paizonyorwa sign
read
patemple yakanzi
Fabius
Venus obsequiens
Gerges
pazasi
made
pacho
this.
pozonzi Fabius
So
Gerges
your
ndiye
name went on it.
akaivaka.
That temple
Saka
went
zita
into
rako raenda
disrepair.
ipapo. Temple iyi
Another one was built by
yakazodirikawo,
Julius Caesar,
imwewo
and
yakadaro
he built
yakavakwa naJulius
Venus
Caesar.
Genetics,
Julius Caesar akavaka Venus
or
genetics
Venus the mother.
kana kuti Venus vanova mai, genetics zvireva mai.
So, because Julius Caesar claimed to have descended from Venus.
Nekuti
So I just
Julius
want you to
Caesar
keep
aiti
that
iye
in mind.
akaburukira kubva
This is
kuVenus.
information that is
Ndoda kuti
easily
mungova
obtained through a
neinformation iyi
Google
mupfungwa
search on the man,
inowanikwawo
and who we
muGoogle
should all
search
be familiar with
the
by
man
now.
yatinofanira kunge
So that's
takuzivawo
readily available
muzuva ranhasi.
information.
Inowanikwa paGoogle
So
zviri nyore.
these were what
Information
he was known for.
Izvi ndo
We'll come back to
zvaizikanirwa.
that.
Tichazodzoka zvakare kwazviri.
Okay, so let's also notice, we'll just draw this up again.
Ngatimbotarisaiwo zvakare
So if we note
tichadhiwa
November 9,
tichanyora apa
Actually.
kuti November 9.
1989,
1989.
time of the end.
tonyora kuti time of the end.
And this is verse 40.
Iyi ndiyo verse 40.
And we'll note July 18,
Tichanyora apa July 18,
2024,
2024.
Sunday Law, verse 41.
Tonyora Sunday Law ndima ya 41.
And let's consider the line of agriculture.
Ngatimbotarisai
Because on this line we can
line
also
agriculture.
note
Nekuti
that there will be
paline
a
iri
period
zvakare tinogona
of
kunyora kuti panenge
early
paine
rain
nguva ye-early rain.
and a period of latter rain.
Poitawo
We are
nguva
now in the
ye-latter rain.
period of,
Tava munguva ye
okay, my thing has dropped out. I will just pop it up again. Okay, here we are. Okay, so on the line of agriculture, we can mark the periods of the early and latter rain.
muline
So
reagriculture
the early
togona kumaka
rain
maperiod
occurs
e-early
within the
rain
time period of
ne-latter
verse
rain.
40, the latter
Early
rain
rain
in the
inoitika
time period of verse
verse 40.
41.
Latter
And what I
rain
want us to
inoitika
note
munguva
here
ye-verse
is that
41.
rain
Zvandoda
is
kuti
rain.
tione apa ndezvekuti
The
mvura inonaya
rain that we
ingori mvura
receive
inonaya.
in verse
Mvura
41 is
yatinowana
just a
verse
heavier
41
amount of the rain
ingoriwo
we
mvura
received
inonaya
in
yakati
early rain.
wandei than
We need to
yatakawana
understand the
verse
early rain.
40.
And Ellen White says as
Tinofana
much. You
kunzwisisa
cannot be benefited by
rain.
the latter rain
Ellen
unless
White
you've received the early rain.
anoti haugoni
So what we are
kubatsirikana
studying
ne-latter
today
rain kunze
is
kwekuti
absolutely
wagamuchira early
dependent
rain.
on understanding the
Saka
messages
zvatiri
that
kudzidza
have been
nhasi
given to
zviri
us
dependent
prior
nemamessages
to
atakapiwa
2024.
2024 isati
These are the
yasvika.
messages we need to be
Aya ndiwo
reviewing.
mamessages atinofanira kunge tiri
They will
kudzongorora.
open up to us the latter rain.
Achatizarurira
It's
latter
the
rain.
same rain.
Imvura imwe
So verse
cheteyo.
40 is a battle
Saka
over spheres of
verse 40
influence.
ihondo pamusoro
The king
pemaspheres
of the
of
south
influence. King of the
is
south
Gorbachev.
ndiGorbachev.
The king of the north
King of the north
is Bush.
ndiBush.
And what does Gorbachev want?
Gorbachev anenge
He wants a
achidei
multipolar world.
anoda nyika iri multipolar.
And what does Bush want?
Bush anodei
A unipolar world.
anoda nyika iri unipolar.
Okay, but when we get to verse 41, do we have a king of the south?
Asi patinosvika paverse 41
King of
tina
the
king
south
of the
is
south
dead.
here. King of the south
That's Sunday
anenge
law.
afa pasunday law.
So the battle now is not between the king of the north and the king of the south.
Saka
It
hondo
is
inenge
between
isisiri
the
pakati
king,
pa king of
the
the
battle
north na
here
king of the south.
is the
Inenge
king of the
ya
north
hondo apa inenge ya king of the north
and
na
the glorious land.
glorious land.
So what's the difference?
Saka musiyano uri
Well,
papi.
who is the glorious land?
Glorious land ndiani?
The glorious land
Glorious land
is the city on the hill.
ndiyo guta rakagara pagomo.
It's the goodly land.
Ndiyo nyika yakaisvonaka-naka.
It's spiritual Israel.
Spiritual
It's
Israel.
the USA
USA
with its original purpose, its original calling.
nepurpose yayo
What was its
yekutanga, calling
original
yayo
calling?
yekutanga. Calling yayo
To
yekutanga
be a
yanga iri
beacon of hope for the world.
kuve
To
beacon
give
of
the
hope
world moral
kunyika.
guidance.
Kupa nyika
To be an
moral
asylum for the
guidance.
poor, the blind, the huddled masses.
Kuva asylum kune
That was the
varombo
calling of the goodly land.
vasingaoni nemamasses ese ndo yaiva
So
calling
who is the king of the
yegoodly land
north?
iyi. Saka ndiani uye
I'm going to
chii
give the
king of the north?
north a different name.
King of the north
I'm going to call it the
ndichamupa
Sunday Law
zita rakasiyana.
Movement.
Ndichaidaidza nchiti movement yesunday law.
Ellen White says that the Sunday Law Movement
Ellen
has
White
been going
anoti
on in silence.
movement yesunday law yanga iri
It
kuenderera mberi
continues in
murunyararo.
silence.
Inoenderera mberi
It goes on in
murunyararo.
secret. Because we know that the Sunday law
secret.
movement has to be at the time of the end.
Nekutoza kuti
Because what
movement
arrives at the
yeSunday
time of the
inofanira
end?
kunge iripo patime of the end.
The
Nekuti
first
chii
angel's
chinosvika
message.
patime of
In the
the
first
end?
angel's
Imessage
message,
yengirosi
all the
yekutanga.
messages are combined.
Message yengirosi
It's
yekutanga
warning
messages
us.
awo
Sunday law is approaching.
akabatanidzwa. Inenge
Judgment is
ichiti
approaching.
pachenjedzo
If
yekuti
Sunday law is
Sunday law iri
approaching, the
kusvika.
Sunday law
Judgment
movement must be
yasvika.
in
Kana
existence.
Sunday law
But
iri
it will go
kuapproacha,
on in secret.
Sunday law movement inofanira
What
kunge
we were,
iri muexistence, ichienda iri
what we are
musecret.
called to do is to be able to recognize
Zvatinodaidzwa
it.
kuti
At what
tiite
point it
tinofanira
becomes visible
kuirecognize. Kuti
and to
ndepapi
follow it
painotanga
and to
kuonekera.
recognize the
Uye
Sunday law movement
kuitevera,
when it becomes visible.
kuiona Sunday law movement painotanga kuonekera.
Okay, so from 1989, the Sunday law movement, it's there, and it advances in time until it
inoenderera
becomes
mberi
more
munguva
visible.
kusvikira
So it's
yakuwedzera
secret,
kuoneka. Saka inotanga iri secret,
and then it's going to become visible.
then yozotanga kuchionekera.
So there's another drawing that we need to consider when we're looking at Daniel 11:40 to 45.
Pane imwe drawing yatofanira kutarisa nayo patinotarisa kuna Daniel 11:40 to 45.
And you're familiar with this.
Izvi
We
tinozviziva.
mark this as Sunday law.
Tinomaka apa Sunday law.
I'm going to mark this panium.
Iyi ndichaimaka nchiti panium.
And what we see is when it comes to the, we mark a deadly wound of the king of the south at Panium.
Zvatinoona tinomaka deadly wound yaking of the
We
south
mark its
papanium.
death.
Tomaka
Sunday
kufa
law.
kwake paSunday law.
But when we talk about the rise of the seventh kingdom
Asi patinotaura nezvekumuka
and the
kwekingdom
decline
yechi7
of the sixth,
uye kudzika kweyechi6,
think of the seventh kingdom as the Sunday law movement.
fungai ne7th kingdom semovement yeSunday
Think
law.
of the sixth kingdom as the glorious land.
Fungai nekingdom yechi6
Maybe I'll write
seglorious
that down
land.
here. Seventh,
Pamwe zvindozvinyora panapa.
Sunday law
Seventh.
movement.
Iyo 7th ndiyo Sunday law movement.
Sixth,
Yechi6
it's the glorious land.
ndiyo glorious land.
And what do we call that? Because this has been going on for a while.
Izvi tinozvidaidza tichiti chii
War
nekuti zvazviri kuenderera mberi
On
kwechinguva.
Western Front.
Hondo kuwestern front.
And this between the king of the south and the king of the north, war on Eastern Front.
Izvi pakati paking of the south naking of the north toiti hondo kueastern front.
So remember the latter rain
Saka
is just
rangarirai
more of the early rain.
latter rain ingori
So in order
early
to
rain
understand
yatiwa
Sunday
ndei.
law
Kuti tigone kunzwisisa Sunday law
and understand the present and the future,
nekunzwisisa
we
zviri
need to
kuitika
be going
izvezvi
back.
nezviri kumberi tofanira
We
kunge
need
tiri
to
kudzokera
understand what
kumashure.
brought us
Tofanira
to this
kunzwisisa kuti
verse, to this time
zvakatiunza
period.
pavhesi ichi, zvakatiunza panguva
And
ino ichi.
we need to understand Panium.
Tofanira kunzwisisa zvakare panium.
But I actually want to go back to 2014. I want to look at the line of the Nethinims.
Asi ndoda kuti tidzokere
So we're
ku2014 ndoda
told that the
kutarisa
light
line
of the midnight
remaNethinims.
cry
Tinoudzwa kunzi
lights our
light
path
remidnight
all
cry
the way to the second advent.
rinopenyesa nzira
So if we
yedu
were to draw that,
kusvika kwese
Here's our
kusecond
path.
advent uku. Kana
the midnight
tikuzvidraw
cry
iyi ndiyo path yedu iyi. Midnight cry
is going to light the
ichapa
path
chiedza
all the way to the second
panzira
advent.
kusvika kwese kusecond advent uku.
But we're also told,
Asi
Elder Tess has
zvakare
told us, to
tinoudzwa.
walk in the
Elder
events
Tess
of
akatiudza kuti
2014
tifambe
all the way
mumaevents
through.
a2014 munzira yese iyi.
So while the light of the midnight cry will light our path,
Saka chiedza chemidnight
the
cry
events
chichipenyesa
of
rwendo rwedu
2014
zviitiko
will
zva2014
continue also
zvichaenderera
all the way
mberi
through to the
zvakare
second advent.
kusvika kwese uku kusecond advent.
So we need to understand both those things.
Saka tinonida kunzwisisa zviitiko
And that makes
zvese zviri
sense to
zviviri.
understand our Sunday law.
Zvinomeka sense kunzwisisa Sunday law yedu
Let's go back to the first Sunday law on our lines.
yatinayo iyi. Ngatidzokerei kuSunday law yekutanga
We were
paline
told
redu.
that the priests need to watch and understand their line in two parts. So let's consider the line of the priests.
Vanofana kunzwisisa nekutarisa line ravo maparts maviri. Saka ngatimbotarisai line remapriests.
She said, understand the line of the priests in two parts.
Vakati nzwisisai line remapriests maparts maviri. 2014 pakati
1989.
Apo pekutanga pa 1989 uku kuine 2021.
What happens in 1989?
Chii chinoitika muna 1989?
The little book is opened.
Kabhuku kadiki kanozarurwa.
And what are we to do with the little book?
Kabhuku kadiki akatofana kuita sei nako? Tukufana
and what is the
kukadya.
eating of the little book?
Kudya kabhuku kadiki
It is the
kuita sei?
comprehension and glad reception.
Ndiko kunzwisisa
And what we've been
nekugamuchira
told is that
nomufaro.
this time period here
Takaudzwa kunzi nguva iyi iri apa
is all about
ndeyechekuita
glad reception.
nekugamuchira nomufaro.
Sunday law is 2014.
Sunday law iri 2014.
Accept it.
Igamuchirei.
Understand and accept the date that it exists.
Nzwisisei mogamuchira kuti date racho ririko.
And then between 2014 and 2021, we are to comprehend.
Then pakati pa 2014 na 2021 tineta kufana
We
kuchinzwisisa.
unpack it.
Totanga manje kuchizarura chinzwisisa.
But we are also to understand at the external events through the eyes of the Nethinims. So let's consider the line of the Nethinims.
Tofana kunzwisisa ma-external events kupurikidza neline rei remaNethinims. Saka ngatimbotarisai
2014,
2014,
2024,
2024,
close of probation.
close of probation.
What is our job between 2014 and 2024?
Basa redu pakati pa 2014
Gladly
na
receive.
2024 nderechi kugamuchira nomufaro.
Accept that it exists.
Kugamuchira kuti iriko.
Terrie, we've just lost your screen there.
Sorry about that. It is a bit of a problem. Where was I? think is that one. Yep, gladly receive. And now we are to comprehend.
Tatanga tagamuchira nemufaro, then tochizofana kuchinzwisisa.
We still can't see your screen if we're
Oh, I
supposed
didn't
to.
share it, did I?
Yeah, that's
I'll put
okay.
it back up. Thank you. Yeah, it's a process. All right, so what I want to do is we're going to go through the events from 2014
So
to Sunday law. We're not going to go through them in any great detail.
But
we want to
2014 kusvika Sunday law
recognise
mudetail.
two things.
Kuti tiongorore
The
zvinhu
battle
zviviri.
on the Western Front and the
Battle
battle on the
Western Front
the Eastern Front.
nebattle kuEastern Front.
So as we go through the events from 2014,
Saka pamene tichitarisa maevents kubva
you
2014
need to take note of what battle we're talking about with each one.
tinofana kuongorora kuti iyi battle
So
riri ratiri kutaura
2014.
nezvaro. Saka 2014
It's a Sunday law.
iSunday law.
And we know that a lot happened in
Tinoziva kuti
2014.
zvakawanda
But there are
zvakaitika
three
gore 2014.
key things that happened that directly related to the US government.
Asi pane zviitiko
And at the
zvitatu
very top of the
zviri
list,
zvakaitika zvine ukama
what was the
directly
most
nehurumende
important thing that happened in
yekuAmerica.
2014 in
Chakakoshesesa
relation to
chii
prophecy that Elder
chakakosha
Tess listed?
chakaitika 2014 muprofesi
The purging,
chakaitika chakataurwa naElder Tess.
of the Republican Party of
kucherura
moderates.
Republican Party vachibvisa mamoderates.
This is going to set the party up for a complete transformation.
Izvi ndo
To
zvakagadzirira
quote
party
Elder
iyi
Tess
kuti
on
ive
January 1,
netransformation iri
2022,
complete.
she said, I
Tichikota
am not sure
Elder
we
Tess,
really
January
grasp the significance of what has
22,
taken
January
place.
1. Vakati
As she lists
handinyatsokuziva kana
this as the
muchinzwisisa
key,
significance
it's the top of the
yezvakaitika
list of the
izvi.
key events of
Vanoimaka
2014.
setop yemakey significant issues
The
of
second
2014. Yechipiri
is Mitch McConnell's he blocks
ndiMitch McConnell
judiciary appointments.
akabloka
This is going
maappointments
to have far-reaching
emajudiciary.
ramifications for the Sunday law.
Zvakava nemaramifications aisvika
The third thing,
mberi mberi
Burwell
nyaya dzesunday law. Chechitatu
versus
chavakamaka
Hobby Lobby.
icourt case yaBurwell versus Hobby Lobby.
Birth control and religious freedom.
Yaiita nezvebirth
And I would
control
suggest
nereligious
they were her
freedom.
top three. I'm going to suggest the next one because so much
Ndichasuggesta
time was
kuti
spent on
ndoyaiva
it
top 3
is
yaElder
Gamergate.
Tess. Ndichasuggestawo kuti yechi4 nekuti takapambadza nguva yakawanda tichiitarisa yaiva nyaya
So
yeGamergate.
2014, Sunday law. 2016,
Tinonyora Sunday law.
it's an increase of knowledge.
2016 increase of knowledge.
And what do we have?
Tine chii
The
ipapo?
2016 elections.
Tine my-elections are 2016.
We mark this as Concord,
Iyi tinoimaka seConcord.
and the other significance is a death decree.
Chimwe chiri significant
So we know that Trump won this election.
saka tinoziva kuti Trump akawina
But I just
election
wanted,
iyi.
I do have a paper here that is in PDF form and I can't put it over onto my screen. So I'm
Tine
just
paper
going to
in
read the
PDF.
key findings from this
Handisi
PDF
kuzorisa
and then I'll
pasi.
share a couple of articles.
Ndichangoverenga zviripo.
But this is from the
Pa
Pennsylvania
PDF.
State University
Inobva kuPennsylvania
and
State
it's done a
University.
research brief
Vakaita
and it's
research
called Deaths of Despair and
Yainzi
Support for Trump in the
Deaths of
2016
Despair
presidential
and
election.
Support for Trump in
And
the
this is the key
2016
findings of that
election.
research paper.
Zvavakawana
That Trump
research paper iri.
overperformed the most
Trump
in counties with the
aka-overperforma
highest
zvakanyanya
drug, alcohol and
mumacounties
suicide
aiva
mortality rates. Now just
nemasuicide
remember that
nemadrug
the US was going
abuse
through an
rates anga
unprecedented
akakwirisa.
opiate epidemic,
USA yaiva
and
neepidemic
that was a very
yemaopiates
important theme of the
panguva iyoyo yemadrugs.
2016 presidential
Izvi
campaign.
zvakabatsira
Both Clinton and Trump
2016
spoke on the
presidential
subject, expressed
campaign.
concern about the
Clinton
crisis,
naTrump vese vakataura
and they offered
neconcern
strategies,
pacrisis
different
iyo yanga
strategies to deal
iripo.
with it. But the key
Vakapawo
findings
mastrategy
were
akasiyana
that
siyana
he
ekuti vashande
overperformed
nawo.
in those states that had the biggest
Key
problems with
ndeyekuti
that. Much
aka-overperforma
of this relationship is
mumacounties aiva
accounted for by
nematambudziko
economic
neizvozvo.
distress and the proportion of working class residents.
Nekumwe kwaiva
Trump performed
nemaeconomic
best in
distress
counties with
nekumwe
high
kwaiva
economic
nevanhu vasina
distress and a
mabasa.
large
Trump
working class.
akaperforma zviri nani.
Drug, alcohol and suicide mortality rates are higher in counties with more
alcohol
economic
and suicide
distress and a
mortality
larger
rates.
working class.
Kwaiva
And many of the
neeconomic
counties with high mortality rates where Trump did the
unrest
best have experienced
ne high working
significant
class
employment
ndoko
losses
akawina.
in manufacturing over the past several decades. So it lists 5 key findings. All has to do with deaths of despair and support for Trump that helped him gain that election. And I'll just share, just so that you know this isn't just a one-off.
Ndichangosharewo kuti muzive kuti haisingori one off.
And that's not it. Okay. This is Drexel News. So Drexel is a university in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this is an article written in 2017 called Death Rates Have Swung the 2016 Election. So their study and research had shown the same significant increases in the death rates of white middle-aged people over the last 15 years appear to be tied to increases in Republican voting that helped lead to Donald Trump's election in 2016. I'll just drop to the bottom of this article because I thought this was interesting. We should consider public health as a potent marker of social upheaval. Moreover, the health of the electorate, especially those middle-aged folks who are dying prematurely, is central to a democracy. So some interesting findings there. And this is a similar article done by Columbia University Irving Medical Center, where they linked shorter life expectancy to the 2016 presidential election outcome. And similar findings.
2016 election.
So I'd suggest that we can mark death at 2016, the increase of knowledge. So I just want us to note that you can mark that death at 2016, that the increase of knowledge, their first increase of knowledge was an election.
Increase of knowledge yawe yekutanga yaiva election.
Okay. Okay, so the 2016 elections, and we'll go to 2018, which was the formalization. July 16, Donald Trump meets with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, and this is where Trump sided with Russia against US intelligence, against the FBI. He debased himself. So a very embarrassing moment for the United States in their war against the against Russia. And then in July, actually one journalist report said that this was really like kicking your own goal in soccer terminology. And then December 19, there was the withdrawal of troops. Trump withdrew troops from Syria and Afghanistan. So we'll come down to 2019. And this is the Nethinims 9/11. Sunday law. It is a Sunday law for the Levites. And we see the first, November 9, the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Let me quote Elder Tess. Will the Republican Party follow Donald Trump, embrace his conspiracy theories, completely throw in their independence as a party to his cult of personality? Or would they stay the conservative party that they are but distance themselves? Well, history has given us the answer. They stood by Donald Trump. And this marks the Republican Party's last chance to turn it around. This impeachment was a mistake. It was thought to have been where they could expose Donald Trump and put him out of the picture forever, but that totally backfired.
izvi zvakavadzokera zvakatonyanyisa.
Choosing Donald Trump on November 9, 2019
Kusarudza
will
Donald
lead
Trump November 9,
the party to
2019
accept the
zvakaitisa kuti
conspiracy
party
theories of
igamuchire
2020,
maconspiracy
the election
theory
results,
a2020
that opposed the election results. It was the
angari
last
kumashure kuna
opportunity for
election
them to turn
results.
around.
Yanga iri opportunity yavo yekupedzisira kuti vatene around.
2019, April, also note that in April,
Zvakare muna April
Vladimir Zelensky won their presidential elections in a landslide victory over 70% of the vote.
Yakanyanya akawina over 70% yesarudzo.
So 2020.
Saka 2020
it's an increase of knowledge.
Kuwedzera kweruzivo.
We mark May
Tunomaka
25,
May 25,
George Floyd death decree. And we mark a number of deaths in this history, and each of these deaths are a step in the removal of restraint. So with the death of George Floyd, what Biden failed to do was reform the police system. There was no reform, so what's going to be handed to the Republican Party is a system that is desperately was in need of reform. So when you think of John Lewis, Conscience of the Congress, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her fight for LGBTQ rights and women's rights, Chadwick Boseman and the fight against racism in the entertainment industry, all of these people represented the restraint that they had on these things within those spheres, and that is gone. And this will lead to the death of Helen Reddy on September 9. I should say September 29.
September 29, Helen Reddy.
And this will be the last cry from women. They will no longer be able to roar. So there's this death. We know that we are living in a history of the failure of feminism. September 29 also marks the first presidential debate. Where Trump said, stand back, stand by.
Trump akataura achiti stand back, stand by.
Which was a call to his base, basically saying your time is coming. This 2019-2020 period marks the removal of restraints from different places that will leave Republicans with raw, unrestrained power. Let's come to Panium. So Panium is 2021.
Panium is 2021.
It's a Sunday law.
Sunday law.
It's also 275 BC.
Zakari 275 BC.
Comes against the king of the south.
King of the north.
Rome defeats Pyrrhus at Beneventum. We note that the world takes note of Rome at Beneventum. And it's also 1945 and 1989 on the line of World War II. All of these things will become significant. So what do we mark in Panium? First of all, January 6, the insurrection. War on the Western Front. The US Capitol building in Washington, D.C. was attacked by a mob of Donald Trump supporters in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. January 20.
January 20.
The inauguration of Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Trump was the 5th president in history not to attend their elected successors' inauguration.
Trump ndiye aiva
He
president
held his own
wechi5
farewell
munhoroondo
ceremony,
asina
first time in
kuatenda ceremony
150 years.
inaugurate kekutanga mu150
The
years.
outgoing president attending this
President
inauguration is
anenge
meant to
achibuda
symbolize a peaceful
kuatenda
transfer of power.
inauguration iyi
He
zvinomiririra
didn't attend.
peaceful transfer yemasimba. Iye Trump haana
War on the
kuatenda.
Western Front.
Yaiva hondo kuwestern front.
April,
Muna April
we're going to mark the spring
tichamaka spring.
2021 war scare.
Spring 2021
This is where
was
Putin
kutyisidzirwa
sent
kwehondo.
his Russian troops and hardware on the border with Ukraine.
Apo
This
Putin
was meant
akaisa
to signal
mauto
to the
ake
new
paboda
US
reUkraine.
administrations to
Izvi zvaida kuti
butt out,
zvityisidzire
to,
administration itsva yaBiden kuti
to tell them don't
avaudze
bring
kuti
Ukraine any closer to NATO or else.
musatombounza Ukraine
They
pedyo
also
neNATO.
wanted them
Otherwise,
to back out of aiding in any of
vaidawo zvakare
the
kuti
liberation attempts of the occupied areas of
vasatsigira
Ukraine. So this was
occupied
meant to
areas eUkraine.
scare the United
Izvi
States
zvakanga zvakaitirwa
away.
kuti vatyisidzire
and it
America
backfired.
kuti ibve iende kure. Izvi
So
zvakazoita
prior to this,
backfire.
at the
Mushure
election
meizvi,
of Zelensky,
pasarudza
Zelensky
raZelensky.
was
Zelensky
not really clear or decided on
akanga
whether
asiri
to
clear kana kuti anga asati anyatsosarudza kuti
have any connection with NATO.
ova
But this
nekubatana
spring
neNATO
war
here
scare
kana kwete.
changed all of
Asi
that. So now he's going to
kutyisidzirwa
really push
kwakashandura
to become a
zvinhu.
member of NATO
Ndozvakabva zvaita
and to
kuti
get
apushe achida kupinda
outside help.
muNATO awanewo rubatsiro kubva kunze.
July 12,
July
so that
12
was war on the Eastern Front.
ndo
July
yaiva hondo
12
kuEastern
is the
Front
Putin
yatata.
essay
July 12 ndiyo essay yakanyorwa naPutin
called On the Historical Unity of
yaidaidzwa
Russians and
ichinzi
Ukrainians.
on the
And he
historical
argues
unity
that
of
there's this
Russians
like
and
threefold,
Anenge achiita
triune
kuti
group
pane
of
boka
Russians, Ukrainians, and
reubatanzwawo hutatu.
Belarusians. They're one people, they have
VekuRussia,
a common
vekuUkraine
heritage and a common
nevekuBelarus.
destiny.
Vane
So
heritage
basically, this is
imwechete, vanhu
propaganda.
vamwechete,
It was a
achingotaurawo propaganda
rewrite
dzake
of
idzodzo.
history,
Achinyora
and he's
nhoroondo
blaming
patsva.
the West for
Achipomera
anti-Russian
mhosva
conspiracy
kuWest.
theories.
Achiitawo maconspiracy theory
August
ake
30,
ekuRussia. August 30
Afghanistan withdrawal.
Afghanistan inoburitsawo mauto ayo. Afghanistan
This is
America
going to
inoburitsa
mark the
mauto
end
ayo
of a
Afghanistan.
war that began in 2001
Izvi zvinomaka kuguma kwehondo yakatanga 2001
and ended in 2021.
ichigumawo muna 2020.
September 1,
September 1
the Texas Heartbeat Act.
pane act yaidaidzwa ichinzi Texas Heartbeat Act,
Or Senate Bill number 8.
Senate Bill number 8.
So this bill prohibited abortions after the fetal heartbeat was
rairambidza
detected, which was as early
ma-abortion
as 5 to
after
6
fetal
weeks.
heartbeat
It's the most stringent state abortion law in the country, and any individual could sue anybody who performed or facilitated an abortion. So this was a sign of things to come.
Aya aiva mviro dzezvinhu zvaizouya kumberi.
Also on September 1,
Zvakare September 1 iyoyo
the White House issued a joint statement on
White House
US,
yakapa joint
Ukraine,
statement pa-US Ukraine
strategic partnership. Biden met with Zelensky, where he said that the US remains firmly committed to Ukraine's
Biden
sovereignty
akasangana
and
na
territorial
Zelensky.
integrity in the face
US
of Russian aggression.
inoramba yakatsigira
October
Ukraine
21,
kana
I'm just
ichizozvifesa
going to note this
aggression.
here, was Ted Wilson's
October
sermon.
21 tichanyorawo kuti isermon yaTed Wilson
Called Trust God's Prophetic Word in the
yainzi
Coming
Trust God's
Impending
Prophetic
Conflict.
Word in the
where he
coming
talked about the
impending conflict.
apparent,
Apa akataura
aberrant lifestyle behavior of
lifestyle
LGBTQ,
behavior
among
iri
other many
aberrant
errors.
yeve-LGBTQ achitaurawo
October
nezvimwewo mamwe
to
maeras anga
December,
akawanda-wanda. October kusvikira December
we marked an information war.
takamakawo hondo yeinformation.
So during this time, the US took control of the narrative, and it
Panguva iyi
wins the information
America
war. It
yakatora control
preempted
yenarrative
Putin's
ikawina information war.
every step. So what
preempta
Washington
ma-steps
did was
Putin ese
its intelligence agencies would
zvakaitwa
tell the
nevaari
government what Putin was planning to do. They would disclose that, and all those disclosures complicated Moscow's efforts in
kuzvibudisa pachena kwavaita
preparing
zvaikomplicata
for war.
maefforts ese
By
ekuMoscow
exposing
pavaigadzirira
him, they
kurwa hondo.
disrupted his plans. That's the
Pakumuexposa
Brookings
kwavaita
Institute. I'll quote
vaidzivaidza
from them.
maplans
They
ake.
reveal a new understanding
Tichakota
in
kubva
Washington and
kuinstitute
London
yataura
that the information space may be among the most consequential terrain Putin is contesting.
information
And they
space
noted how
yakanzi
different this was from
iri consequential zvakanyanya kuna
2014
Putin.
when the US was caught
Vakazvinota
flat-footed
2014
and with the invasion of Crimea.
pavakawanikwawo vari flat-footed pakainvadwa Crimea.
And lastly, December 27,
Chekupedzesera December 27
Putin gives ultimatum to NATO.
Putin anopa ultimatum kuNATO.
He threatened military action if they didn't guarantee barring Ukraine from membership.
Anothreatena
And
military
he
action
also
kana
wanted
vasina
Western military
kurambidza
deployments in
Ukraine
Eastern Europe
kupinda
reduced.
muNATO. Aidawo kuti
NATO is
Western
going to
membership
reject that ultimatum.
ireducewo membership.
So what we want to note
NATO
here is this is
yakarambawo
Panium.
izvi zvatachida
It is
kutarisa
1945, it
iPanium,
is 1989, it
1945,
is Beneventum, it is a
1989.
deadly wound.
iBeneventum
Russia,
ironda
from this point
rinouraya.
on, is a dead
Russia
man
kubva
walking.
apa angowo
At some
munhurume
point, and
ari
I don't
kufamba
think we're going to have time
akafa
today,
zvake.
I'll see how we go.
Chimwe chinhu
We want to
handizivi
return
hatisina
to
nguva
this
nhasi.
history to look
Toda
at what
kuzodzokera
triggered Russia
panhoroondo iyi kuti kuona kuti
to
chakakonzeresawo
build up
Russia
its military and do the drills it did in
ivake
April.
military dzake iite
Because that's
madrills
also
ayakaita
very,
muna
very
April
telling.
chi nekuti izvi zviwo zvinhu zvinotipawo
So we're going to go to
information.
2022,
Toenda iri sumberi kuna 2022
which is an increase of knowledge.
inova kuwedzera
Now,
kweruzivo.
previously, we have suggested
Kumashure
June 24,
takambosugesta
2022. I'm going to
June
write that
24,
down here.
2022 ndichazvinyora apa.
This is Dobbs
Iyi ndiyo Dobbs
versus Jackson's Women Health Organization, the overturning of Roe and Wade.
versus Jackson Women's Health
But
Organization.
remember, we're
Kupidigurwa
following the battle between Rome and Pyrrhus.
kweabortion.
So
But rangarirai nyaya tiri kutevedza.
let's note this. Panium,
Tiri kutevedza nyaya ipi? Ngatinyore apa. Panium
2021,
2021
275.
i275.
The increase of knowledge
Kuwedzera
is
kweruzivo
2022,
i2022
which is 273.
inova iyo 273.
Sunday law
Sunday law
is 2024,
i2024
which is 272
inova iyo
BC.
272 BC.
This is the king of the north
The
Panium
king of the north
against the
Panium
king of the south.
achirwisana na king of
And
the
what
south.
happened? The king of the south gives an ultimatum on December 27.
King of the south anopa ultimatum pana
Ultimatum.
December 27. Ultimatum.
It gets rejected.
Ultimatum inorambwa.
Gee. This all gets, they're losing the war on information. They're losing the
Vakurusa
narrative.
hondo yeinformation vachirusa narrative
We note
yacho.
that as a deadly wound.
Iyi zvinoimaka sedeadly wound.
On February 22,
February
NATO
22
responds.
NATO inoresponda.
This is February 22.
Iyi iFebruary 22.
On the 24th of February, Russia will
24
invade.
February.
But on February
Russia
22,
inoinvade.
NATO responds,
Asi
and this
February
is where we
22
see
NATO
Egypt
inoresponda.
going to
Ndoapo
Rome,
tinoona Egypt
because now
ichienda kuroma.
NATO
Nekuti
and
izvezvi
in the
NATO
US will
kana
have
kuti US
joined forces
vanenge
to,
vabatana masimba.
well, I mean, I know America is part of NATO,
Ndoziva
but
kuti
we
America
see them
ipati yeNATO asi
in concord
tinovaona
here
vari
to
mukuwirirana pano,
respond to Putin's
vari
ultimatum.
muconcord kuti varesponde
And then we'll
kuultimatum
mark the
yaPutin.
death,
Then tomaka rufu
which we need to. This is where Rome will go to Egypt.
yatinofana kunyora ndo
So-
Rome painoenda kuEgypt.
As the increase of knowledge could also be said to be February
kunogonawo zvakare
22,
kunzi
when NATO
February
responds.
22 NATO painoresponda.
So I'm just going to rub all this one out.
Izvi ndichazvidzima zvangu.
Okay. 2020. I'm going to go to 2024.
Toenda kuna 2024
May 30.
May 30
Trump is found guilty.
Trump anowanikwa ari guilty.
This is a formalization.
Apa pane pari paformalization.
Trump is found guilty in the hush money trial.
Trump anowanikwa ari guilty mutrial yehush money.
And just like the first impeachment, where they thought that that would be the end of Donald Trump, and it backfired, it only empowered him, same thing is going to happen here. He's found guilty on 34 felony counts.
Anowanikwa ari guilty pama-accounts 34.
I'm sure you've all heard who was Time Magazine's Person of the Year for 2024.
Takanzwa kuti Time Magazine
Donald
person
Trump.
wa 2024 anga ari ani? Anga ari
Time
Donald Trump.
Magazine announced its Person of the Year.
Time
How
Magazine
do they do
yakaannounce
that?
munhu wayo
The editors of
wegore.
Time picked the
Vakazviita sei?
person or
Ma-editors
individual
veTime
who, for
vakanonga
better
munhu
or for worse, did the most
for
to shake
better
the
or for
world
worse
and the
akaita
headlines over
zvakanyanya
the
kuti
past 12
adengenedze
months.
nyika akava headline
One of the
kwemakore
reasons they
kwemamonths
gave,
12 anenge apfuura. Imwe
besides
reason
winning the
yaavakapa
presidency
ndeyekuti
and
besides kuwina kwakaita
surviving an
president
assassination
uye
attempt,
kusurvive
was
assassination
that he was
attempt
the first president to become a convicted
akanga ari
felon.
president wekutanga kuti ave
So,
munhu anonzi igororo
becoming a
riri
convicted felon
convicted.
on 34
Kuve
accounts
gororo pama-accounts
gives you a good
34
push to become
kunokupa
Person of the
pusha
Year in the
kuti
eyes of
ukwanisewo
Time.
kupinda
I mean, if
muTime
you're a
Magazine
president,
uve person of
former
the year
president.
nyanyanyanya kana wanga umbori president unogona
So
kupinda
this
muTime
is
Magazine.
not inconsequential.
Izvi hazviwi
This
zvisina
it can be
maconsequence.
tied back to the first impeachment,
Izvi zvinogona kuzosunganidzwa pakati
all these
zvichinanganiswa
trials
neimpeachment yekutanga
and
apo
are just served
matrials
to
ese aya
empower Trump,
anongoshanda kuti ape
because the
masimba
damage
kuna
really was
Trump.
done at the
Nokuti
first
damage
impeachment.
yange yatoitwa kare
I'm also going
impeachment
to, so that's
yekutanga.
May 30.
Iyi iMay 30
May 30, also May 30,
May 30 zvakare Biden
reportedly approved a policy change that will permit Ukraine to use US-provided
anoapprova policy
weapons,
change
including
Ukraine kushandisa
GLMRS rockets,
weapons
but not
eku-USA
longer-range
kusanganisira
ATACMS missiles,
matauro
to strike
asasiri
within Russian
ma-long-range
territory near
missiles
the border
eku-attack.
with Kharkiv Oblast. US officials and people
officials
familiar with the policy
nevanhu vaiziva
told
policy
Western
iyi
media on May
veku-USA
30
vakaudza Western
that the
media
Biden
pamusi waMay 30 kuti
administration
Biden
quietly gave
administration
Ukraine permission to
nechinyararire
use
yakapa
US-provided
Ukraine
weapons
permission
for
yekushandisa
counter-fire
maweapons
purposes.
anenge
So,
akaaprovwa
Biden permission
neUSA kuti vaite counter Russia. Saka
for rockets
administration yaBiden
against King of the
yakapa
South.
permission kuma-rockets aizorwisana
Okay, now we also want to mark July 1,
tinoda kumaka apa July 1
and I want to read from the National Women's, this is Trump versus USA,
toverenga kubva pamunational women's iyi inova iyo Trump versus USA
Supreme Court ruling.
ruling yeveSupreme Court.
And I'll read from the National Women's Law Centre.
toverenga
The
kubva
Supreme
kunational
Court
women's law
term just
center
ended, but the
Supreme
disastrous
Court yabva
effects of their
kupera
decisions are just
asi
beginning.
maeffects ari disastrous esarudzo
So
dzavo
July 1 we
achangotanga.
mark
July 1
an
tinomaka
end and a beginning. It is the end
magumo
of that
uye kutanga
court's term,
magumo
but they're
eterm
marking a
yecourt
beginning
iyi
of
asi vari
disastrous
kumaka
effects.
kutanga kwemaeffects
On
ane
July 1,
disaster.
2024,
July 1
the Supreme
2024
Court
vesupreme
term
court
came to a chilling end
term yavo
with a
yakasvika
conservative
pakumagumo
supermajority
vaine
ruling that presidents are
supermajority
largely immune
conservative
from criminal prosecution
vachiti
for acts
president ari
undertaken while in
immune
office.
kumacriminal
A
prosecution
devastating decision
emaacts
even for this
akaita ari
highly
muoffice
politicised
yaiva
court.
decision yaiva
This
devastating
decision concluded a
highest
term
political
in which
court
the Conservative supermajority systematically advanced its political agenda of
Izvi
expanding
zvakaita
its
kuti
own power and the
maconservative
power of its political allies,
advance
while
political agenda
continuing to
yavo
erode the rights
vachiexpandawo
and
simba ravo
protections of
nesimba
everyday
repolitical
Americans.
allies avo asi
In addition
vachiiroda
to
marights
inviting a future
ema-everyday
president to feel
americans
less constrained by the legality of their actions,
vaita
the
kuti
court also
president
sharply
achazouya
limited the
kumberi
ability of any
asava
future
achibatwa
progressive administration
nemalegalities
to pursue
akawanda
policies that the current court disagrees with.
uye kuti
It
agozopeswa
overturned
makoti
decades of precedent.
policies asingabvumirani
So I'll
nemacourts aya
stop there,
vakaovertena
look that up, and there's
president
many
yanga
similar
yava
articles.
kwemakore nemakore pane maarticles
This was a significant
mapangofanana
event.
togona kuverenga
The relationship
chiitiko chiri
between
significant
the president
ukama huri
and the
pakati
people
papresident
changed markedly
nevanhu
between
zvakachinja
June 30 and
zvinoonekera
July
pakati
1.
pajune 30 najuly
America
1
is no longer the shining
america
light on the hill.
haisisiri
It
chiedza
is,
chinopenya pachikomo
it's no longer there to protect
haisisipo
minorities
kuti
and the needy.
ichengetedze maminorities neavo vanodawo
And then we
rubatsiro
will mark, oh, let me do
tinomakawo
that.
zvakare
And then we will mark July 18,
tinomakawo zvakare July
takeover of
18
the Republican Party.
takeover yeverepublican party
The RNC.
rnc
This marks the complete takeover of the Republican Party.
izvi zvinomaka
So on the line of the
takeover
Nethinims,
complete yeverepublican party paline
it
remaNethinims
bookends 2014, bookends with 2024
inoita bookends
and the complete
2024
takeover.
necomplete
The
takeover
significance of 2014,
significance ya
2016,
2014 ya
2019,
2016 ya
2021 leads to the
2021
conquest of the Republican Party.
paconquest yeverepublican party kuwina kwavanoita
Because this
muhondo idzi.
party was America's
kuti party
first
iyi
line of defense,
ndiyo yaiva
and
first
its
line of
death
defense
is
yeveamerica
marked in Daniel 11,
rufu
verse
rwayo
45.
runomakwa pana Daniel 11 ndima ya 45
And we'll read that.
izvi tichazviverenga
Let's just go back.
tongodzokera mashure
And he, the king of the north,
iye king of the
shall
north
plant the tabernacles of his palace
dzika
between the
matabernacle
seas
epalasi
in the
yake
United
pakati
States, the glorious holy mountain. Yet
pemaseas
he shall come to his end, and none
eunited
shall help
states
him.
inova glorious
So the king of the
holy
north,
mountain
the Sunday
asi
law
achasvika
movement,
pamagumo pake pasina
shall
anomubatsira
plant the
king of the north
tabernacles. What's in
Sunday
the
law movement
tabernacle?
ichaplanta matabernacle chichiri mumatabernacle
So we have previously called them tents,
kare
but
taimbomandaidza
these are
tichiti matents
sanctuaries.
asi
This is where you would
inzvimbo
set up
dzekunamatira
your Apis bull,
ndoapo
or your
paunogona
Venus
kuseta up
obsequium,
Apis
or your
bull yako
Venus
kana
genetics,
mavenus
whatever you want to
obsequium
call it,
mavenus
is
genetics
set up
zvisinei nekuti unoda
between
kuzvidaidza
the
uchiti chii
seas. The image to the
zvinosetwa
beast
up
is set up
pakati
between the seas
pemaseas
in the
image of the
United
beast
States.
inosetwa
Who are
up
the seas?
pakati pemaseas
They're the
kuunited
people.
states
The
maseas
Republican
ndevana
Party is now
ndivo vanhu
between the people.
Republican Party yava
The
pakati
people will need to
pevanhu
make a choice.
vanhu
It doesn't.
vanofana
The
kuita
people don't
sarudzo
make a choice. on July 18.
avaiti
That will
sarudzo
come
musi
later.
July 18
Who's
vanozoita sarudzo yavo later.
there on July 18?
July 18
Who was
ndiani aripo?
there on the plain
Ndiani
of
akanga
Jura
aripo
in
paplain
Daniel
of
chapter
Jura
3?
kuna Daniel chapter 3?
The princes, the governors,
Maprinces,
the
magovernors,
sheriffs, the
masheriff,
magistrates,
ana
the
magistrate,
rulers, the delegates, the
vatongi, madelegates,
representatives are there on the
vaimiriri
plain to
ndo
see the
vaivapo
image of the
paplain
beast
kuti
unveiled,
vaone
not the
image
people.
of the beast.
The image of the beast is
Kwete vanhu,
between the
image
people.
of the beast iri
Come election
pakati
day,
pevanhu.
the image of the
Parinozosvika
beast
zuva
will be
resarudzo,
right in front of them. That's
image of
all
the
they've
beast
got.
inenge iri pamberi pavo ndo yega yavanenge vainayo.
But at the Republican convention,
Asi
it's
paRepublican
between the
convention
seas.
iri pakati pevanhu.
It marks the beginning of a campaign. July 18,
Kutanga
Trump
kwecampaign.
is
July 18
gets the
Trump
nomination
anowana sarudzo
as their presidential candidate,
secondidate
and the
yavo
campaign
yepresident.
begins.
Campaign iya yobva
How are we going
yatanga.
for time? So I just want to share
Saka ndoda kungoshare
a portion from Stephen Haskell.
chikamu chinobva kuna Stephen Haskell.
And this is from chapter 17, the
Zvinobva
work of the
kuchapter
mystery of
17,
iniquity.
the work
It's
of
his
the
commentary
mystery of
on Daniel
iniquity.
chapter 11
Commentary yake pana
from
Daniel chapter 11.
stories of Daniel the prophet.
Kubva pane nyaya
In the
dzaDaniel
first
muprofita.
paragraph, so in his
Paragraph
introduction to
yekutanga.
Daniel chapter 11, he's
Introduction
going
yake
to
Daniel
compare
chapter 11.
457 BC
Achakompare
with
457
538.
BC na 538.
457, important date in Jewish
457,
history.
idate rakakosha
538, a
muJewish
milepost
history.
in the history of the
538,
Christian church. And he's going to compare them
history
and
of Christian
compare
church.
the time prophecies associated with them.
Achakompare
Let's go
izvozvo
down to the
nematime
second
prophecies
paragraph.
anoassociatwa nazvo. Ngatiende
The
paragraph
fully
yechipiri.
developed papacy was
Papasi
not the
yange
work of
yadevelopwa
one
zvizere.
nor of 2
Yaisiri
years
basa
any more
regore
than the
rimwe chete
universal
kana
power
maviri.
of Babylon, Medo-Persia, or Greece was an immediate
Sezvakangoitawo Babylon,
acquisition.
Medo-Persia, Greece
As those kingdoms
yaiva
grew in power,
immediate
so
acquisition.
papal Rome grew in power.
Semakingdoms
According to
aya
Revelation
akakura mumasimba,
13:2,
Papal
the
Rome
dragon
yakakura
gave the beast
mumasimba.
his power
Tichiverenga
and
Revelation
its
13
seat
verse
and
2.
its great
Dragon
authority.
yakapa masimba.
The work
Chigaro
of
chayo
Constantine and Justinian in
great
gaining
authority.
power
Basa
for this
raConstantine
new organization
naJustinian mukuwana
was
masimba
parallel to the
eorganization iri
conquests
itsva.
of Cyrus,
Zvaizoita
Alexander,
parallel
and Caesar in their
kuwina kwakaita
conquests
Cyrus,
for their
Alexander naCaesar
respective nations.
muhondo dzavo nenyika dzavo
Babylon,
dzavakamirira
Medo-Persia, and
dzakasiyana-siyana.
Greece, Rome.
Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece neRome.
The seat of the pagan Roman
Chigaro
government
chepagan
was
Rome
removed to
muhurumende
Constantinople,
chakaiswa
thereby giving room for the
Constantinople
papacy to be
zvichipawo
seated on the throne in the city on the
papasi kuti
Tiber.
igadzwe
As
pachigaro.
territory and a capital
seat
were gained
Tiber.
gradually, so
Seteritori
the authority of the papacy was a
wana
gradual
capital
acquisition.
ichigaina gradually.
Each of the
Authority
four
wepapasi
universal
yakakurawo zviri
kingdoms
gradual.
had a distinct policy
Imwe
which was
neimwe yeformer
followed
universal
throughout
kingdoms
its
yaiva
existence.
nedistinct policy yaizotevera
Likewise, the papacy
throughout
had its
existence yadzo
policy,
yese.
just
Saka
as
kufanana
clearly
naizvozvo
defined.
papasi yaivawo
The
nepolicy yayo
working of this
yange
policy
yakadifainwa
in
zviri
its
pachena.
inception
Kushanda
is best
kwepolicy
seen
iyi
in Alexandria.
payakazvarwa
It was
inoonekwa
there
zvakanyanya
that
kuna
the two
Alexandria.
streams,
Ndeipapo
paganism and
apo nzizi
Christianity,
mbiri,
mingled their waters.
paganism nechristianity,
The papacy had birth on
zvakasanganisa
the banks
mvura
of the
dzayo.
Nile.
Papers
Egypt was the
yakanga iripo
originator.
pamabanks
It
eNile.
nursed it.
Egypt
And
ndiyo
as it
yaiva
grew, it
originator.
breathed in the miasma of its surroundings.
Yakazviita kuti zvikure
First, Christians
payaizokura.
interpreted the Bible according to pagan thought, and paganism, appearing to be
Vakristu
vanquished, in
vakambointerpreta
reality
Bible according
became
to
the
mapagan
conqueror.
thoughts and the
Now,
paganism
this
ichiita kunge
passage
yakaita
is
vanquished
quite rich in
mureality
information.
yakazova conquer.
I want to pull a
Information
couple of things
yakawanda.
out of this
Ndachida
to
kutora
start with.
zvimwe zvinhu kubva apa kutanga nazvo izvozvo.
So let's remember things that we used to know very well.
ngatimborangarirai zvinhu zvataimbowa neruzivo nazvo
So
zvakanyanya
what
kare.
Haskell does is he's quoting Revelation
Haskell
13:2,
zvaanoita ari kukota kubva kuna zvakazarurwa 13 ndima ya2
and which says that the dragon gives the
inotaura
beast
ichiti dragoni
power,
yakapa
seat, and
beast
great authority.
power, seat negreat
So
authority.
what came first
Chii chakatanga
when we talk
kuuya
about the
patinotaura
papacy?
nezvepapasi?
First
Chekutanga
comes the seat.
pakauya
In
chigaro
330 AD,
mugore ra330 AD.
Constantine moves his capital from Rome in the west to Rome in the east, leaving a
Constantine
void that's
anomuvha
going to be filled in
capital
by
yake
the
kubva
church.
kurome kuwest ichienda kurome
A
kueast.
seat is given
Izvi
to
zvinobva
the
zvakupaiwa
Roman church.
nekereke. Chigaro chinopiwa kereke yerome.
In 508,
Muna 508
we see power
tinoona masimba.
when Clovis is baptized
Clovis
and dedicates his
paanobhabhatidzwa
army to the church of
odedicata
Rome.
hondo yake kukereke yerome.
538,
538
authority.
tinoona masimba.
Justinian
Justinian
declares the Pope of Rome the head of all
anodeclare
churches and the
Pope of
corrector of
Rome
heretics.
sahead wemakereke ese
So what's
uye
left?
corrector wemaheretics. Chii
What's
chine
left is
chasara?
538,
Chine chasara i538.
and every dissenting voice has to be removed.
Mazwi
We see
ese
the removal of the
anopikisa anofana
Ostrogoths
kubviswa. Tinoona kubviswa kwemaostrogoths
out of the city of Rome, and
vachibviswa
now
muguta
the
reroma.
takeover, the conquest is complete.
Vozo take over
It was
yeconquest
gradual.
inenge
It
yapera.
happened over
Yakanga
quite
iri
a bit of
gradual.
time.
Yakaitika kwenguva
But there
yakati
was
rebei.
a clearly defined
Asi
policy
paiva nepolicy
that
yange
was threaded
yakadifainwa
through
zviri
this
clear,
history.
yakathreadwa through nhoroondo iyi.
So let's come down to our time period.
Ngatichiuyai panguva yedu isusu.
And when did Trump receive his seat?
Trump chigaro chake akachigamuchira pari
2016.
2016.
He gained the presidency and he has
Akawana
claimed never to
presidency.
lose it.
Akaklaima kuti
When did he
haachazomborasikirwi
receive
nacho. Akagamuchira
his power?
rini masimba ake
In 2019,
muna
with the first
2019
impeachment,
neimpeachment yekutanga.
because this is going to take
Nekuti
the Republican Party to the
izvi
point of no return,
zvichatora Republican Party kusvika panzvimbo
and that
yavasingachagomudzokera
they will
mumashure.
stand behind him from this
Vanomira
point on.
naye kubva panguva iyi.
When did he receive his authority?
Akagamuchira masimba ake rini?
July 1,
July 1,
2024.
2024.
Received great authority
Akagamuchira masimba
with
akakura
the Supreme Court case that was
neSupreme Court case.
gave immunity.
Yakamupa
A
immunity.
different reading and understanding of immunity
Kuverenga
than they had
kwakasiyana
on June
nekunzwisisa
30.
kweimmunity yavaiva nayo pana
And
June
then, so
30.
what's left?
Chii chine
Every
chazosara?
dissenting voice is gone.
Mavoice ese
And
anopikisa
on
anenge
July
aenda
18,
July 18,
2024, there
2024.
is no Nikki Haley.
Hapana
There is
Nikki
no Ron
Haley.
DeSantis.
Hapana Ron DeSantis.
What we have is the
Ta-
Sunday law movement,
Chatava nacho
in
iSunday
full
law
display.
movement yava pafull display.
and they know
Vanenge
they've got the
vachitoziva
election in the bag.
kuti election
They
vanayo
know it.
muhomwe yavo.
We know it. The
Vanozviziva
movement
izvozvo.
knew it.
Isusu
And I
movement
would
tine
suggest even the
chizviziva.
Democrats knew it. And that's why
Ndinotosuggesta
they're going
kuti
to
even
panic and try Plan B.
mademocrats vaizviziva ndosaka
But they
vakapanika
are
kuti
assured
zvavakaita.
of victory there on July
Asi
18,
July 18
2024.
vanosimbiswa pakukunda kwavachaita.
If we
ivo
can write it out
veRepublican.
this way,
Kana chigona kuzvinyora nenzira iyoyi
we can mark a dictator
tinogona
in
kumaka dictator
2016,
mugore ra2016
but he's restrained,
but anenge
doesn't have full
akarestrainwa,
support of the party.
anenge asati ane
We can
rutsigiro
have
ruzere
dictator
rwepati iyi.
in
Tinogona kuva
2019,
nedictator muna 2019
but restrained
asi anenge akarestrainwa zvakare
by circumstances. We
nemacircumstance
mark a
anenge
dictator
akamutenderedza. Tina
in
dictator zvakare
2021,
tinomumaka
but
2021
that dictator is restrained.
asi dictator uyu anenge akarestrainwa.
On July 18,
July 18, 2024.
That dictator is no longer restrained.
Dictator uyu anenge asisina kurestrain.
Now it's really true that he could stand on Fifth Avenue
Izvezvi
in New
chine
York
chachokwadi kuti
and shoot
anogona kumira
anybody, and
muFifth
he's not
Avenue
going to lose
muNew York
that election.
ogoshuta munhu ende hazvina zvazvinomuita
He could-
hamburusi election iyi.
His rhetoric, his
Kutaura
rambling,
kwake,
his
kurambula kwake,
abuse in his
abuse dzake
campaigns reached
mumacampaign ake
unprecedented levels.
zvakasvika
Didn't make
malefu
scrap of
angasatambosvikwa. Zvakaita
They had
difference
that
yakakura
election in the
chaizvo.
bag.
Election vaiziva kuti ndeyavo.
So we've got time. July 18,
July 18,
2024.
2024.
You remember Dana White?
Rangarai Dana White.
He's CEO of the UFC,
The CEO
the Ultimate
UFC,
Fighting Championship.
Ultimate
And he is
Fighting
the final
Championship.
speaker at the
Ndiye mutauri
RNC.
wekupedzisira
He's the one that
paRNC.
introduces
Ndiye
Donald Trump.
anointroduce Donald Trump.
Usually, that would be
Kazhinji
done by your
kazhinji
spouse. In the
zvaiwanzoitwa
past, it was
nemudzimai
done by
wako.
Melania,
Kare
and I think in
zvakamboitwa
2020 it was
naMelania.
done by Ivanka.
2020
But this
zvikatoona
year, Dana
Ivanka.
White
Asi
introduces.
gore iri Dana White ndiye akaintroduce.
On November 6,
Musi wa6 November,
Dana White
Dana White
is at the victory party in
anenge ari
Palm Beach, Florida.
ku-victory party kuPalm Beach,
Donald
Florida.
Trump's victory celebrations.
Victory celebration Donald
And
Trump.
you would understand Dana White is a man that
Unonzwisisa
is
Dana White
admitted to assaulting his wife.
anenge akatobvuma kuti akamboassaulta
He
mudzimai wake.
takes the microphone. He
Anotora
wants to thank
microphone.
all the people
Anenge
that
achida
he
kutenda
saw were
vanhu vese
crucial to
vaakaona
delivering
vari
his
crucial
friend Donald Trump the
mukudhilivha shamwari
presidency.
yake Donald
And
Trump
who's he going to thank?
nepresidents. Ndiani
I'll quote him.
vaachatenda
I want
ndichikota.
to thank the
Anoti
Nelk
ndinoda
boys,
kutenda
Aiden Ross,
vakomana
Theo
veNelk,
Von,
Eldon
Bussin'
Ross,
with the
Theo
boys,
Von,
and last but not least,
uyo
the
hanzi
mighty and
nemaboys
powerful
uye
Joe Rogan.
wekupedzisira
So
Joe
you should know
Rogan.
who these
Saka
people
vanhu
are.
ava munofanira
Nelk
kuvaziva
boys,
kuti ndivanani. Vari kunzi the Nelk
Aiden
Boys,
Ross,
Aiden Ross,
Theo Von,
Theo Von,
Bussin' with the boys,
Bussin' with the boys,
and the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
zvakare Joe Rogan uyo ane masimba akanyanya.
So what happened after the second impeachment of Donald Trump?
Chii
Donald
chinoitika
Trump was getting
mumashure
pretty
meimpeachment
depressed. He's sitting there
yechipiri
watching
yaDonald
the
Trump. Donald Trump
television
anga ane
and he's
depression.
watching what's said
Achiona
about him. He's talking to his friends because he calls his
TV
friends
achitaura
closely around
neshamwari
him when,
dzake.
most of the time,
Panoitika
actually.
zvinhu zvese izvi anodaidza shamwari
And he's
dzake
talking to
dzinenge dziri
Dana
pedyo
White.
naye. Anenge
And he
achitaurawo
finds out that
naDana
there's going to
White.
be a fight.
Ona kuti pachava
Because he's in Florida, there's going to be a
fight.
fight down, not wherever it's going to be.
Anenge ari
Says to
muFlorida.
his aides, we should go down to that. I think they're going to like
Zvonzi
me.
handei ikoko
So he did.
kufight
He
iyi
went
ndikuti
down to that
vachakufarira.
fight
Saka akaenda
and got a
kufight iyoyo.
standing ovation.
Vanhu
Lifted the roof when he walked into
vakasumuka
the room.
vachimuomberera.
So once the campaign started,
Kampeni
July
yatanga
19,
July 19.
they hired a young male consultant who
Male
had been a
consultant
social media
wechidiki. Aiva
influencer
social
himself.
media influencer
And
pachake.
they, Susie Wiles commissioned him
Wiles commission
to
team
go and write a list of all these people that
vaenda
Donald
vanonyora
Trump
list
should
yevanhu
talk
vese
to.
ava vanofanira kutaurwa
So he did. He went
naDonald
and wrote a
Trump.
list, and then they went to
Saka
Trump,
akaenda
and
akanonyora
they said, "Look,
list
we think
akaenda
that there's
naTrump
these
akati
people that you should be talking
tifunga kuti
to
pane vanhu
on
ava
the
vanofanira kungochitaura
social
nava
media." And he
pasocial
says,
media.
"Have you
Akati
talked to Barron?"
wambotaura
And they
naBaron
hadn't
here.
talked to Barron. He said, "Go talk to
Vakasanda
Barron
taura
and then come
naBaron.
back to me."
Zvikanzi
So they
ndinotaura
went and they
naBaron
talked to
uzouya
Barron.
kwandiri.
And
Vakaenda
Barron
akataura
Trump said,
naBaron.
"Yep, you've got to talk to
Baron
this one,
Trump
this one,
akati
this one, this one."
taurai neuyu neuyu.
And that began
Izvi ndo
a
zvakatanga
campaign
campaign
of reaching out to people through these
yekuricha
what they call
out kuvanhu
Podbro
kudikidzana
podcasts
neavanodaidza
or the
vachiti
manosphere.
podbro mapodcasts evemanosphere.
So what began on July
Saka
19 was a
chakatanga July
sophisticated
19
plan
yaiva plan
based on
iri
close readings
sophisticated
of voting trends.
yaiva
This was
based
no fluke.
pamaclose
It was a
readings
campaign strategy on reaching low propensity
yaiva
voters
campaign
by
strategy
using the
yekuricha
manosphere.
malow propensity voters
So this,
vachishandisa
like I said,
manosphere.
this began a marathon of podcasts,
Zvandataura
and they reached
zvakatanga marathon
millions.
yemapodcasts
And you will read
vakaricha
articles
mamillions.
where these young male white voters really brought home the victory to Donald Trump. So come November 5, what you're going to see is the results of this. The results of this are that they are emboldened. And you will now hear the phrase, your body,
unobva watanga kunzwa kutaura kwekuti muviri wako
my choice.
sarudzo yangu.
That's how emboldened
Ndo kuva bold kwavanga vava.
these supporters are now.
Masupporters aya vanga vava neboldness yakanyanya zvakadaro. Feminism munyika ino yato lost cause.
And July
18,
2024
Kura 2024
and November 5
ndiyo yaiva chikonzero.
2024
November 5
is the effect.
2024 ndo aiva ma-effects.
And many other examples could be given
Pane mimwe
of this
menzanso yakawanda
emboldening.
inogona
We saw it this week
mukuita
actually
emboldened.
with, or was it last week, with the
takazviona
shooting
kana
of
kuti last
CEO.
week nekushudwa
You're
kwaitwa
seeing anarchy.
CEO. Unoona anarchy.
And this type of sentiment and feeling
sentiments
will only,
feelings
with the health services CEO, health
CEO,
insurance, I'm sorry,
the health insurance.
So we can see cause and effect here, and that's not hard to see because the effect of any campaign is an election. But you can't look through. Sorry. If you follow this history, you can follow a thread, and the thread is in voting. The thread is the King of the North winning against the King of the South, defeating, and also the King of the North defeating or conquering the glorious land. Those two things are happening consecutively. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, but no, we've run out of time, so that's okay. So what we've done today is understanding the present and understanding the future is absolutely reliant on us understanding the past. It's going back to the past messages of Elder Tess and unpacking them, unpacking Panium. I would like to suggest that people stop repeating me. I think Ezekiel did a lovely job today, and thank you. We all benefited from it. We need to go back and unpack the messages that were given to us prior to 2024. We need to understand the early rain. If you are out there and you do not understand war on the Eastern Front, war on the Western Front, Beneventum, any of those things, then you need to tell your teachers, because that's what you need to be hearing from the front, on the forums, on our Zooms. We need those histories understood and repeated to understand our own history. So on that note, let's close. Our loving God in heaven, we see a lot of heartache and tumult in the world. We see the failure of feminism. We know that the only hope for this world is in this movement, that we are the only ones that understand what is going on. But Lord, we pray for greater understanding as these things are happening in a quicker time frame.
nenguva yakasika.
We want to be on top of it.
Toda
We
kunge
want
tiri
to
pamusoro pazvo.
recognize
Toda
and
kuzviona
accept what is happening
nekugamuchira
and be prepared for what is to
zviri
come.
kuitika.
So help us in that
Kugadzirira
preparation.
kune zvinhu zvichauya.
We know that
Tidetserei
when the
mukugadzirira
cry went out, there were
tinoziva kuti kuchema kwakaitika.
people that were asleep,
Paiva nevanhu
but there were those
vakarara.
that made that
Asi kune
preparation
vamwe
even in their
vakaita
sleep,
gadziriro
that they
iyoyo
still had oil in the
kunyange mukurara
lamps.
kwavo vaiva
Let
neoil
us not be found without that
mumalamps
oil,
avo.
without that
Kuitai
early
kuti
rain.
tisawanikwa
Whatever
tisina
parable
oil
we
iyoyo,
want to
tisina
use,
early rain.
help us to understand it
Parable
and
ipi
to apply it.
yatingashandisa tidetsereiwo
We know that at
kuinzwisisa
every
nekuiapply.
waymark there are three
Tiziva kuti
groups:
pamawaymark ese
those that
pane mapoka
reject,
matatu, avo vanoramba,
those that love and cherish,
avo
and those that
vanoda
accept but don't
nekucherisha,
cherish. Help
poita
us to
avo
cherish,
vanogamuchira asi
which means eating the
vasingacherishi.
book, eating and
Tidetsereiwo
understanding to the
ticherishe
best of our
zvoreva kudya
ability.
bhuku.
I
Kudya
pray
bhuku
for the teachers
nekunzwisisa to the
that
best
they would
of our
take this on
ability.
board
Tinamatirawo vadzidzisi
and
kuti vazvitorewo
go
izvi
over Elder Tessa's material
vaende
until it
kumamaterial
is
elder
understood
test
and applied
dzamara
correctly.
yanzwisisiwa
So
yaapplywa
thank you for this
correct.
morning. Bless us as we
Tikutendai nemangwanani ano tikomborereiwo
enjoy the rest of these
apo
Sabbath hours. And we ask
tichinjoya
in Jesus' name.
maSabbath hours
Amen.
ese aya muzita raJesu tinonamata. Amen.